At the beginning of the movie, Ed asks Victoria when she first noticed the strange events. She says her father believed something unseen was following him. The doors he locked at night would be opened by morning, and then he began hearing voices. She thought he was just aging until the day she found him gone. After that, the house grew silent until she began feeling watched. Victoria says there's something in there, and when she's alone and it's very quiet, it calls to her. Ed tells Lorraine that he has a bad feeling about this, but she reassures him that she can handle it. As Lorraine enters and scans the room, a sudden silence falls, and a whisper calls her name. She approaches an object covered in a white cloth, and when she pulls it away, she discovers a mirror beneath it. Lorraine introduces herself, explaining that she is here to help and can feel the spirit, but there's something else. Suddenly, she hears a noise behind her. Though she sees nothing, she reaches for the mirror, and the moment her hand touches it, it cracks. She then sees her demonic reflection in a terrifying vision, followed by a sharp, intense pain in her stomach. Ed rushes in at the sound of her screams, asking what happened, and she whispers, "The baby." On their way to the hospital, Ed asks, "What was that back there?" And she replies, "There was something in the room, in the mirror." Next, we see her in the delivery room, and her situation quickly worsens when the power suddenly goes out. Lorraine immediately senses the presence of a dark entity. She hears a demonic growl and sees an entity crawling along the ceiling, moving toward her. But just then, Ed enters, insisting he needs to speak with his wife. Lorraine whispers, "Don't let it hurt the baby." But the doctor interrupts, telling Lorraine she needs to push. As she pushes, the doctor tells her to stop, saying the head's out, but the cord's around the neck. He quickly cuts the cord and urges her to push one more time. Finally, she gives birth, and the doctor hands the baby to the nurse and notices Lorraine is still bleeding. The nurse calls for the doctor, and Ed anxiously asks what's wrong, but the doctor doesn't answer. Instead, he checks the baby's heartbeat. Feeling something wrong, Lorraine pleads, "Give me my baby." The nurse approaches and hands her their lifeless child, and holding her close, Lorraine begins reciting prayers, begging God to bring her back. Miraculously, after a tense moment, the baby starts to cry. Even the doctor and nurses are stunned, and when they ask her name, Lorraine softly replies, "It's Judy."
Comment. Subscribe to Recapss Horror.
As Judy grows up, she confides in Lorraine, tearfully saying she keeps seeing horrible things that won't stop. Lorraine calms her, reminding her to shut it down just like she taught her. She leads her through a rhyme, which Judy repeats. Once calmer, Judy asks, "What if I can't make them go away?" And Lorraine reassures her, "You can. It's your choice." 20 years later, we're introduced to Jack Smurl and his family, who are attending Heather's confirmation ceremony at the church. Jack and Janet Smurl share the home with Jack's parents, Mary and John, along with their 4 daughters, Dawn, Heather, and twins, Karen and Shannon, and their dog, Simon. Jack gifts Heather an antique mirror for her confirmation, and as she unwraps it, Simon starts barking. Heather notices a crack in the glass, but Mary reassures her that Grandpa can fix it, explaining that they found the mirror at a swap meet over in Bucks County. Janet then brings the confirmation cake to the table, and before Heather can blow out the candle, it goes out on its own. She blames Dawn, but Dawn flatly denies it, and just then, the ceiling light suddenly crashes down, narrowly missing Heather. After decades of investigating the supernatural, Ed and Lorraine Warren had seen it all. But in 1986, in suburban Pennsylvania, they faced an evil unlike anything before, one that would devastate their family and end their careers. Due to Ed's worsening heart condition, the Warrens retire from active investigations, but continue giving lectures, though attendance has grown sparse. Later that evening at dinner, while they're ordering food, Lorraine hears a faint whisper, but soon she realizes that Judy is quietly reciting the rhyme she taught her as a child, the one meant to help her block out her visions. Lorraine gently places her hand over Judy's to comfort her, but then notices a demonic hand on Judy's shoulder. Ed asks if she's okay, and Lorraine forces a smile, saying, "I just thought I saw something." The next morning, While Janet is in Dawn's room, her eyes are drawn to the old mirror, and suddenly, a toy springs to life on its own. Janet picks it up and turns it off, saying, "What are you doing here?" Next, we see her in the basement, scrubbing clothes when someone whispers her name, startling her. Heart pounding, she takes cautious steps toward the light switch, eyes darting to a dark corner. But when she flips the switch, the corner is empty, and suddenly the washing machine roars to life on its own. Later, Janet is talking on the phone when someone yanks the cord, and she assumes it's Karen and Shannon, since they've done this before. Then, the cord is released, and Janet continues with her work, but the receiver is pulled away. She tells the girls to come out, but is shocked when she sees them running upstairs. Just then, someone pulls the receiver into the room, and when she turns on the lights, there is no one there. Meanwhile, Karen and Shannon are playing in her room when Karen notices that her doll, Susie, has disappeared. She goes out looking for it and finds Susie in Dawn's room. Confused, she walks over to her doll, but suddenly, the doll stops moving and then turns over on its own. Karen watches as the doll slowly sits up, and before she can react, the doll stands up and begins to levitate in the air, revealing the ghost of an old woman holding it. That night, Karen tries to tell everyone what she saw in Dawn's room, but they dismiss her, thinking she's just a child. Later, Heather tells Dawn that the mirror feels strange, saying it's as if those creepy-looking babies are always watching her. The two of them then remove the mirror from the house and leave it with the trash. The next morning, the waste collectors throw the mirror into the garbage truck and crush it. Meanwhile, Dawn feels her stomach churn violently, and an overwhelming urge to vomit seizes her. Everyone checks on her, and she suddenly vomits, startling them all. Then, without warning, she spews a torrent of dark blood, and witnessing this, everyone else recoils in terror. She claws at her mouth and pulls out a shard of glass. They decide to take her to the hospital, while Heather is horrified to discover numerous shards of glass scattered in the kitchen sink. Meanwhile, a doctor sternly warns Ed that he cannot afford to have another heart attack. Later, at Ed's birthday party, Judy introduces her boyfriend, Tony, to Father Gordon, telling him that Father Gordon used to work with her parents and mentions that Tony was a police officer who retired early. Later, Tony meets a man who introduces himself as Brad, a former associate of the Warrens. Tony asks if he has ever witnessed an exorcism, to which Brad points to a bite mark on his cheek and says, "That's a battle scar." Meanwhile, Judy is looking through old slides in her room when the lights suddenly dim and she catches Annabelle's reflection in the mirror. Terrified, Judy begins reciting the rhyme her mother taught her, and after a tense moment, when she turns back, Annabelle is gone. Meanwhile, in the garage, Tony hesitantly tells Ed and Lorraine that he bought a ring a week after meeting Judy. He admits that they've only been dating for 6 months, but he can't imagine his life without her and would love to have their blessing. Lorraine smiles and tells him the ring is beautiful, but then, setting it aside, she gently reminds him that their family isn't like other families, and Judy will always be their little girl. She acknowledges that it's been a short time, but adds that she and Ed also barely knew each other when they got engaged, yet somehow, they just knew. Finally, she says warmly, "Of course, you have our blessing." However, Ed says, "You're a good kid, but this is a little early," and Tony nods, agreeing to wait a month before asking again. Just then, Judy walks in and notices the ring. Tony quickly tries to grab it, but it slips from his hand and falls to the floor. Judy asks, "Is this for me?" To which Tony smiles and says yes. Judy joyfully accepts his proposal, and Tony gets up and slips the ring onto her finger. Overwhelmed with happiness, Judy rushes to hug her mother, while Ed smiles and congratulates Tony. Later, Gordon tells them that they have had a couple of calls for their help. Ed asks, "Are they local?" But Lorraine interrupts, telling Father that those days are behind them now, and Gordon says he knows he just had to try. Meanwhile, Jack tells his family that Father Jensen has submitted their case to the Archdiocese, but Dawn asks if he'll really let them stay in a haunted house. Heather suggests staying in a motel, but Janet reminds her they can't afford it. Jack explains the church must first document everything, but Dawn snaps, that the entity wants to kill them and accuses him of not believing her. Jack insists that's not what he's saying, but just then, the table shakes and frustrated. Dawn gets up and storms off toward her room. Later that night, as Jack is about to go to sleep, the door to his room creaks open on its own. He reaches for his glasses, but they slip from his hands, and as he bends to pick them up, a ghostly woman appears at the foot of his bed. Paralyzed with fear, Jack collapses onto the bed, only to begin levitating in the air, gasping for breath, and in sheer horror, he sees the entity crawling on top of him. Meanwhile, Heather watches her confirmation video, fixating on the moment when the candle blew out on its own. She keeps replaying and pausing it over and over until, to her horror, she sees the face of the entity that extinguished the flame. Just then, a vehicle passes by, and in its light, she notices an axe on a chair. Suddenly, a dark figure emerges from the shadows and attacks her, but she dodges just in time. The entity laughs, advancing towards her, and as he swings the axe again, Jack suddenly crashes into the bed. Hearing Heather's scream, Janet rushes downstairs, finding her daughter trembling on the ground. Heather whispers that someone is in the house, but when Janet flicks on the lights, no one is there. The family decides to share their story with the press in hopes of finding help, and their story spreads like wildfire. One day, Judy goes with Lorraine to Brenda's boutique to choose a wedding dress. Brenda helps Judy try on a gown in the changing room when the phone starts ringing outside. She calls out to Maureen to answer it, but when there's no response, she says that the girl is an idiot and tells Judy she'll be right back. After Brenda leaves, Judy sits down to adjust her skirt, but to her shock, she sees her reflection in the mirror standing on its own. Terrified, she stands up, and when she turns around to check, everything seems normal. Just then, the door opens, and thinking it's Brenda, Judy says she's starting to feel claustrophobic. Without a word, Brenda reaches up her skirt as if adjusting it, and Judy nervously asks if she's okay. But Brenda says nothing and begins laughing unnaturally. Realizing something is terribly wrong, Judy watches as the entity reveals itself. Horrified, Judy begins to recite the rhyme in fear, but the entity comes dangerously close, and just when it seems inevitable, the lights snap back on and the entity vanishes. Judy exhales in relief, but her reflection suddenly grabs her by the neck and strangles her. She collapses to the floor, and at that moment, Lorraine and Brenda rush in, asking what happened, but Judy is too stunned to answer. Meanwhile, Mary is being carried out of the house and placed into an ambulance, and at the same time, Father Gordon arrives on the scene. He asks Janet, who was in the ambulance, and she replies that it's her mother-in-law, explaining that something pushed her down the stairs. She adds that things are getting worse, and they can't afford to leave. Janet expresses her relief that he's here, saying they thought the church had forgotten about them. Gordon explains that the church doesn't know he's here. He's actually from Connecticut, but he has worked on cases similar to theirs, and has been following their story closely in the news. Next, we see him in the basement, sprinkling holy water to cleanse the space, but the water begins to sizzle and emit smoke. He rushes upstairs, telling Janet that something is here. She asks if he's leaving, and he reassures her they are going to help her. Gordon visits the church to meet Bishop McKenna, and the receptionist tells him to wait, saying, "He'll be with you in just a moment." As Gordon sits, he notices that his nose is bleeding. Just then, Gordon's attention is drawn to a cord outside, and when he turns back, he realizes the receptionist is missing. Confused, Gordon gets up and looks around, and just then, the phone rings. He picks it up, only to be shocked to hear Judy's voice telling him he can go now. His attention then shifts to the bishop's office, where the doorknob begins to turn on its own, showing an upside-down cross. Suddenly, the door bursts open while the other door slams shut, and then the room plunges into darkness. Gordon quickly reaches for his bag and pulls out his cross, but a strong wind sweeps through the room, and the cross suddenly catches fire. He continues reciting prayers, though his hand begins to burn, forcing him to release the cross. Next, he comes out and pulls the cord from the plug, wraps it around his neck, and plunges down the stairwell. Meanwhile, Ed takes Tony to his museum, warning him not to touch anything, explaining that everything here is haunted, cursed, or used in rituals. When Tony asks why they don't just destroy them all, and Ed says, sometimes destroying it makes things worse, so it's safer here than out there. Tony wonders how many cases they've handled, and Ed replies, maybe 1,000. He says, they started young, about your age. Gesturing around the room, he adds, every item here in this room is their story. It's their life's work. Tony admits he was intimidated by Ed that day, and Ed gently explains, Judy was stillborn, probably for a minute, the longest minute of their lives, and as a parent, that's something you will never forget. So, while she is his fiancée to them, she'll always be that little baby, fighting for her life. Just then, Lorraine and Judy arrive, and they inform him of Gordon's death. Later, at Gordon's funeral, Judy reaches for his coffin, and the moment her fingers touch it, she is suddenly trapped in a horrifying vision. Before they leave, Father Ziegler approaches Ed and Lorraine, telling them that they are mostly infamous within the circles of the church, but Gordon always spoke highly of them. He believed in the mission and the things they did together, and he considered them both friends. As he is leaving, Judy rushes after him and hesitantly asks, where did Father Gordon die? And he replies, Pennsylvania, but God only knows why he was out there. Later at home, Lorraine notices that the kitchen sink is clogged. She presses the flush button, but the water still won't drain. She puts her hand into the water to try to fix it, when suddenly a locket slips into her hand, and to her horror, she realizes it's Judy's. But her fear intensifies when she looks into the sink and sees it filled with blood. In panic, the locket slips from her fingers and falls into the crimson water. The blood begins to surge and spread across the sink. But Ed arrives, and just like that, the blood is gone. Lorraine tells him that something's wrong with Judy, and just then, there's a knock at the door. She opens the door and asks Tony, where is Judy? Later, Ed and Lorraine arrive at the Smurls' house, where Jack welcomes them inside, and the moment Lorraine steps in, she senses the presence of dangerous entities lurking within the house. Just then, Judy comes out, and seeing her safe, Lorraine embraces her tightly. She asks Judy what she's doing out here, and Judy explains that Father Gordon was here just before he died, but Lorraine insists that they need to leave. She apologizes to the family and begins to lead Judy out, but Judy stops them. She reminds them that they never run from fights, and that's what they always told each other when a family needed them. She admits she doesn't know why she's here, but emphasizes that they are all here now, and the family needs them. Ed and Lorraine decide to help the family, and meanwhile, Judy confides in Tony, telling him that something wants her to be here. Later, Tony asks Ed if this is like a normal case, and Ed replies that they're never normal. Tony asks if cooking pancakes is part of the process, and Ed stares at him before saying, sometimes it's waffles, and they both laugh. Ed then explains that every case and family is different, but fear is always the same, and the demon preys on it. So part of their job is simply letting people know they're not alone. Meanwhile, Judy tells Lorraine that she just realized she has never seen them at work. Just then, a noise comes from upstairs, and when Lorraine looks at Judy, she says she feels it too. Lorraine begins to head upstairs, telling Judy to stay put, reminding her of the promise she made. Lorraine goes into the parents' bedroom and kneels to check underneath the bed. And just then, the bed springs press down. Startled, she straightens up, only to see a dark entity lying on the bed. But it vanishes the next instant, and moments later, she notices a figure passing by outside. Lorraine cautiously makes her way downstairs when a door creaks open on its own, and suddenly, she's struck by a vision. Whispering voices echo around her. She tells Ed there are 3 spirits, not from the house, but from the land itself. A woman once had an affair, and her husband went mad, chasing her and her elderly mother into the basement and killing them both. Ed asks how they are different from the violent hauntings they have seen before, and Lorraine explains that there is something darker hiding behind these spirits, blocking her vision. Meanwhile, Judy hears Lorraine calling her from upstairs, urging her to come up. She heads upstairs and notices the attic door standing open. Assuming her mother is inside, she climbs the steps and peers into the darkness, but can't see anything. She picks up a flashlight from a nearby box and cautiously begins scanning the attic, the beam slicing through the heavy shadows. After a while, she comes across a mirror, the same mirror tied to all the hauntings. Intrigued, she cautiously touches the crack in the glass, and nothing happens at first. But then a piece of chalk rolls toward her. Startled, Judy steps back and her eyes shift to the wall, where she suddenly realizes Annabelle is behind all of this. At that moment, a chair begins rocking on its own, and just after that, several bags tumble down. Judy immediately climbs down from the attic and closes the door, but just as she starts to leave, Karen calls out, asking if she's there. Judy enters the room, searching for her, but sees no one. However, to her horror, she notices Annabelle sitting in a corner. Before she can react, the doll suddenly moves and begins to rise, growing to an enormous size and moving toward her. Terrified, Judy stumbles out and a massive hand comes out, causing her to fall. She scrambles to her feet and finds the hallway empty, but Annabelle suddenly appears, causing her to fall down the stairs. Ed and Lorraine rush to check on her, and Judy tells them there is something in the attic. They are shocked to find the mirror in the attic, and Ed mutters, "It found them." Lorraine steps forward and reaches out to touch the glass, despite Ed's warning. But when she makes contact, nothing happens. And, confused, she tells Ed something has changed. Later, Ed recounts the mirror's story, explaining they hadn't seen it again until today. Dawn insists she and Heather threw it away, but Lorraine explains that it's never that simple. And when Dawn asks about the antique store woman, Ed says they don't know, because they never went back. Ed decides to take the mirror home and tells Tony that no matter what happens tonight, he must do as instructed. He warns Tony and Jack that once they start, there's no turning back and not to touch it directly, because anything can happen, and most likely will. Tony goes to get the car ready, while Ed and Jack wrap the mirror in a cloth. They both lift the mirror, but as they move, a belt opens on its own and falls to the ground. Ed urges him to keep moving, and at the same time, Tony tries to start the car, but it won't budge. Meanwhile, Judy's nose begins to bleed, and she tells Lorraine, "I don't feel well." In the attic, the last belt opens, and the cloth is swept away. Jack panics, seeing the entity above him, and Ed tries to calm him, but Jack suddenly falls down the attic. Ed struggles to maintain control of the mirror, and it slips, nearly landing on Jack's feet. Hearing his screams, Janet rushes upstairs, but Ed tells her to stay back, instructing her to keep everyone away. Meanwhile, Tony manages to start the car and speeds toward home, but suddenly, the old woman appears on the road, causing him to crash into a fence. Meanwhile, the power goes out in the house, and Lorraine realizes that Judy is not in bed. She then hears her coughing and finds her sitting in a corner. Judy begins softly singing the rhyme, but as she slowly turns her head toward Lorraine, it becomes clear that she is possessed. The demon speaks through her. "We've been waiting so patiently for little Judy to come back to us." She then lunges at Lorraine, who stumbles back in panic, but Judy shoves her down into the basement. Simon barks furiously at Judy, but the demon lifts him into the air and slams him against the wall, terrifying the Smurl family. Judy then turns toward Janet and her young daughters, but just then, Ed arrives and, realizing Judy is possessed, tells her to look into his eyes. But Judy moves toward him, chanting the rhyme. Ed desperately tries to snap her out of the possession, but she suddenly touches his chest, triggering a severe cardiac episode. Meanwhile, Lorraine encounters the ghostly woman, who signals for her to be quiet, but suddenly, the woman's husband attacks her with an axe. Terrified, Lorraine stumbles back as he advances toward her, but she falls into a pool of blood. The spectral man approaches her and raises the axe, ready to strike, when Tony suddenly opens the door and rushes to her, asking if she's okay. Meanwhile, Ed manages to grab a pill and swallow it. Janet rushes to him, asking if he's okay and what she should do, to which he tells her to get Jack and the girls and get out of there. The Smurls family rushes out of the house, while Lorraine and Tony emerge from the basement, and she tells Ed it wanted Judy. The three of them rush to the attic, and Tony is horrified to see Judy hanging there. Tony moves to help, but his leg gets caught, and when Ed rushes forward, a chair is hurled at him, but he dodges it. As they attempt to rescue her, Judy goes unresponsive, sending Lorraine into a panic. With a swift motion, Ed cuts the rope, and all three of them tumble to the floor from the attic. Judy has no pulse, so Ed immediately begins administering CPR. Lorraine falls to her knees, pleading with God, begging him not to take her. But as she glances at the mirror, she sees her own demonic reflection and a demon emerging from behind her. Just then, Ed suffers a heart attack, and he tells Tony to continue. After a tense, heart-stopping moment, Judy suddenly gasps and comes back to life. But to their horror, the mirror levitates, and before they can react, it starts spinning violently in the air. Lorraine tells Ed to stop it, prompting him to quickly grab the book, and he begins reciting prayers. However, the mirror spins even faster, and after a tense moment, it suddenly halts. Now, before they can comprehend what just happened, the mirror falls, and then it begins moving toward them, and one of Tony's legs gets trapped in it. Ed continues reading prayers, desperately trying to stop it, but his reflection snarls at him to shut his mouth, and the book catches fire. Ed slams the burning book against the mirror, but it only enrages the demon. The mirror advances toward Lorraine and Judy, but as Lorraine touches it, it stops, and she tells Judy not to look away and not to shut it out. Together, they face the mirror, and when Judy places her hand on it, the glass cracks, and she lets out a piercing scream. Summoning all their strength, the three of them push back, and as Judy declares, "You are not there," a deafening explosion erupts, destroying the mirror and banishing the demon once and for all. The Smurls live in the house for 3 more years without further hauntings, and the remains of the mirror are kept within the Warrens' occult museum. Sometime later, Judy walks down the aisle with Ed during her wedding to Tony, surrounded by all the people whose cases Ed and Lorraine had helped solve over the years. On the eve of their wedding, Ed and Lorraine embrace, and Lorraine shares a vision of their future. They have become grandparents, and she jokes that their grandchild will be spoiled. They finally finish their book, not perfect, but capturing their family's story and everyone they had met. They continue passing on their knowledge, even offering guidance over the phone when needed. As they grow old, Judy and Tony visit with their children, filling the house with love and warmth. Ed smiles, saying that sounds just about right, and the movie ends here.